Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Overflow Podcast, where we're all about living in the overflow of God's presence and power in our everyday lives. I'm Eli Austin, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Pastor Wayne Sutton. Today, we're continuing our journey through Romans, landing in Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 11. This passage answers one of the most important questions we'll ever wrestle with. What does God do when we are at our weakest? And Paul reminds us that Jesus didn't wait for us to get stronger, to get better, or more deserving. Christ died for us while we were still weak, still sinful, and even still enemies of God. That means God's love is not a response to our efforts. It's an initiation of grace. So we're going to unpack what it means to be loved at our lowest and reconciled by God who came down to rescue us. So Wayne, let's start here. Why is it so hard for us to believe that God loved us before we ever got it together?
Because we don't do that as humans. It's really, even as a child, I'm not saying we don't. I'll say Wayne does it that way to the level I should. But I think as humans, we don't. From childhood, I looked at, I love my kids. They play on this little street, this cul-de-sac we live in. And I remember being their age playing on the same, not the same cul-de-sac, but a cul-de-sac like this. But I remembered it was a little different because I didn't like the boys down at the end of the street, and they didn't like me and my cousins. And, we didn't love them. We were enemies with them.
Yeah.
And today we look at political parties, Republican, Democrat. We look at conservatives, liberals. We look at, prejudice over race or whatever. We look at what as a human being, what we do is we love those that love us. And what hit me with Sunday was like an enemy of God. I've never seen I've read the verse, but I've never seen that. But wow. You really are. If you are against him, if you're leading people astray, then that's an enemy. And I'm like, wow, you still love me, even though I was literally spitting in the face of your divinity. I've thought that's just really hit me.
And I think it's really interesting too, because, at this point where he's talking about, or Paul, not he, but Paul is talking about without strength, being loved when we're weak. I think it's something that's really interesting when you take a look at really what he meant there. Oftentimes, your brain immediately goes to physical weakness, and he's not really talking about that. He's talking about that spiritual inability, if you will. It's that at that time, humanity lacked the power to fix the situation, which was a broken relationship with God. So there wasn't any amount of morality, any religious effort, any whatever you want to call it, human strategy that could solve this problem of sin. It required divine intervention. And that was Christ on the cross for us. And that, I think that also kind of helps you, or at least me, understand it doesn't matter where we're at. There's nothing that I can physically do. It's what God has already done for us. And that is just, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to process, I think, too. It's in today's world, you're like, wow, I was 2,000 years ago, right? It's again, as humans, it's the way that we think. But when you really digest that, there is nothing that we can do physically, or the effort that we can put in place. It's God already stepped in for us, and we have that grace.
Yeah.
He shows up when there's no options.
Sure. And I think one of the things we must remember, and it's based on the reality of it, not the feeling of it. You may not feel loved, you may not feel forgiven, you may not feel worthy, but it doesn't matter how we feel, the reality that positioning is there. And for me, I'm telling you, this study has really helped me really look at other people and go, God loves them.
Yes.
God loves them. I was somewhere the other day, and this family walked in, and super nice family, super great people. And I looked at them because of their, and again, I'm guessing they were Muslim. And I thought, he said, there's a couple options here. It goes back to like God demonstrated his love for them just as he did for Wayne, even if they don't recognize that yet. And I'm like, wow, I've got to be a lot here. I've got to be a lot for Jesus Christ. But I think a lot of times when we look at somebody that isn't in our faith or isn't in our belief system, again, goes back to pride, arrogance, prejudice, whatever it tries to creep in, instead of saying Jesus Christ died for him. Even if he's calling out to Allah, even if he's, he died for him. Now, there's only one way to the Father, through Christ. But my goodness, God demonstrated his love for him as much as he did Wayne.
Yeah.
Much as he did.
Yeah, and it's, when you do that, it's funny because you use that story, and my brain goes back to, as a kid, whether it was Sour Patch Kids or M&Ms, like I would separate the colors out, yellow with yellow, blue with blue. And like it's it's the way that your brain works, right? But if you think about that.
It wasn't my brain. I just shoved them in. That could be OCD, but whatever.
I'm a little bit of a weirdo. Yeah, it's probably a little OCD. Ask my mom and dad. Yeah, that's probably part of it. Or better yet, my wife. She'll attest to it. But when I think about that, right, as a kid, and you sort of separate things out, it's how we, as human, like you said at the very beginning, we put things in boxes, whether it's the way that we think, what our belief system is, if you're a fan of a certain team versus something else or whatever it may be. But where I go back to it is there's nothing that we can do, whether I'm black, blue, green, or orange, or I'm a fan of this, or I believe in that. God came, and it says right here, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. And then if you get down and you go through this, that's all of us. It's not just one person. We were all the ungodly at that time. And better yet, it wasn't one standing or the other, as we were at our lowest of lows when he stepped in. And again, it wasn't anything that we could do. He had to come down to us. And how did he do that? He gave his one and only son. So I just think it helps me to understand, because I grew up in a world where it's effort. What do you do? How can you continue to improve? Which I think is important. We should be continuing to mature in our spiritual walk. But I think what this does is it allows us to understand that salvation isn't achieved through effort.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And if it's not achieved through our effort, it's not achieved through someone else's effort either. So going back to like looking at, and I'll just use that family, whether we look at a Muslim family, we're looking at atheists, we look at somebody that's never heard of God, somebody that rejects God. We're all on a different journey, all on this different path. And, but it all ultimately, Christ is the answer. So, and for me, doubting God's love when life gets hard, I don't know that I've doubted his love. I doubted his concern. The disciples, don't you care that we're about to die in this boat? I've been there. As Jerry said, he's asked, where are you?
Yeah.
Where are you at in the situation? And I don't know that, I don't know when I'll ask that again, but I hope I'm going, wait, Lord, I know you're there. It's like, I know you're there. And being a dad, I see my children make mistakes. And sometimes I'm right there to correct it. And sometimes I'm like, it's going to let this ride. I'm going to let this ride. This is about to blow up, but I'm going to let it blow up. So there's a lesson to be learned. And with my little finite mind, I know if I think that way, what is God doing sometimes when it feels like all hell's breaking loose and we don't know where he's at and what are we going to do? And he's like, son, I've got this. Daughter, I've got this. Just, maybe it's a lesson to be learned from our own stupidity, or maybe it's just there's a character building here. I don't know.
And I think it's also goes back to when God steps in at our lowest, there's bigger glory for him, right? It's when he comes in at the lowest of lows, there's nothing that you can do. You're at your, the last straw, it's your last whatever, and he steps in. That is where the glory is so much more. And I think that's also part of, when you look up and say, where are you at? It's almost like he picks and chooses. It's not that he's not there. He knows. And it's, same thing with the awe of God in the book that you've been going through with Bible study. It's the more and more that you read into that, the more and more you realize how much he cares about you.
Yeah.
But it's not that he's going to, and I think it's funny because I've done it. Like, you looked up, where are you at? Why are you not here? He's there. It's almost like, and maybe this isn't right. It's just how I interpret it, is he picks where he comes in, where it's the lowest of lows. So you can immediately go, that's God. That isn't anything that I did. That isn't anything that anybody else did. That's where God steps in. And that's kind of how at least for me, I'm able to comprehend it.
Yeah, I think, and this is a good point, Eli. I think we got to be aware of that. Lord, let me be aware when you step in.
Yes.
Let me be aware. Let me give you honor. But sometimes God, and I had a friend who used to say, Wayne, he's a behind the scenes God. He works behind the scenes. And I believe that. There's things that happen. He protects us. But if you don't stop and recognize it, then not only does he don't receive the honor he's due, but other people don't see it.
Yes,
I was absolutely healed. I could have had a choice here to go, wow, some people are going to think I'm crazy. Some people won't believe that. Some people, and keep it quiet. Or no, Jesus healed me at, this church on a Friday night. Here's how it went. Here's how it went. Okay, that's insignificant. But what is more significant is he forgive me from being the sinner bound for hell that I was. That's more significant. And I really, and this really isn't in the topic of this, but I'm going to bring it up. We've got to stop. And listen, I'm all for the miracles and signs and wonders, and we're going to keep pushing. But we can't dismiss the person that says, Lord, save me. Lord, help me. He cares. So years ago, I wrote a thing on Facebook. It was like, he cares about the war in, I think we were in Iraq or Iran, wherever we were at that time. He cares about that. But he cares just as much for the kid with the runny nose that's got a cold that says, Jesus, help me. Just as much. And when we recognize that, God gets the honor, gets the glory. He loves us no matter where we're at. We need to love him. We need to show our love for him no matter where we're at.
And that's
related. Yeah.
No, that's really good, because I think what it talks about throughout, 6 through 11 is it's a demonstration, right? But it's even in verse 8, but God demonstrates his own love towards us. It's demonstrates. And that was Christ dying on the cross, his son coming down. We can say all day long, which, how many times do I say I love you to my wife? How many times do you say it to Candace? How many times do we say it to people? I use that phrase a lot because I think love is important. But to your point, there's a big difference between saying I love you and demonstrating love. And I think when you then take that and apply it to your life, there's a lot that we could say, yes, I'm a Christian, or yes, I do this, but how are you demonstrating it? How are you walking it out on a daily basis? Because he demonstrated it for us and continues to. How are we then demonstrating it to him? It's not just, and I think we've talked about this too, even in offline, of how do you make prayer more impactful? It's not just going through the motions. It's sitting down and approaching it. Like I said last Wednesday, like when I want to hear the God's voice more clearly in my life. And when John Bevere talks about going and approaching God with the awe, with the reverence of seeing where he is and how abundant he is in your life, and not just your life, but to your point, everywhere where there's turmoil, where there's not turmoil, he is still there. It makes it a lot easier for us to walk it out, truly walk it out as a demonstration for others to know him. Like that's that piece that it's sort of what I took out of this as well, is that demonstration piece. This isn't just him saying, I love you, humanity. No, this was him coming in and saving our butts.
Yeah. And that I love that. It is saving our butts. And while we were enemies, I don't know. Like I said, I've read this so many times, but whenever Jerry said it Sunday, it just hit like, what is an enemy? But it's easy to say while we were enemies with God, but what is an enemy? And a lot of people don't see themselves as an enemy. see themselves as distant. But
Yes.
I have, but I think of opportunities I had in the past throughout 50 plus years, but even like, let's just go into adulthood. In the last 30 years, there's so many opportunities where I had the opportunity to help somebody, to lead them towards Christ or whatever, but I didn't. Because I wasn't living a Christian lifestyle. Instead, I was leading them down a different path.
Yeah.
And I've literally said, Lord, this person, that was the way I led them, was not towards you. So forgive me. And that made me an enemy. So, I just shared for those who, this may sound a little weird, but I look at like my daughters. Now I remember my son. I mean, I will let, let's just go. I'm just going to pick on education for a second. I'm getting way off here, but you'll reel me back in.
That's all right.
I look at education, whether it's public school, Christian school, whatever. I look at education like this is not just informing my child so they can pass a test. This is forming my child. Now, if it's something I don't really agree with, don't understand, there's a difference in being against something because I don't understand it. There's a difference in being neutral. And then there's where Wayne gets mad and Wayne gets angry, is when they start teaching nonsense. And my son was in 8th grade and they were really pushing evolution and monkeys and da-da-da-da. And I was like, all of a sudden, it wasn't just, no, son, let me tell you about the creation story again. No, they became an enemy to me. If someone brings an agenda that I don't agree with towards my family, and my children or my wife, they're an enemy to me. I'm just being real. So I know I've been an enemy to God because I've done the same.
Yes.
But he still loved me enough to say, son, I'm going to use you. I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to make all things new. I'm going to restore. My goodness.
How good is that?
It shows you the love of God that I don't have, that I wish I did.
Yeah.
That we grow into.
Yeah.
Think about it. Have you been an enemy to God? And don't do it from shame. And do it from when you recognize you were an enemy of God. When you led somebody down a path, and it could be because you were just not leading them towards Christ. If you're not leading them towards Christ, you're leading another place. When you realize you were an enemy of God, you'll appreciate his grace so much more.
That's so good. The way that you broke that down, I mean, it really does. It lands. And I appreciate you taking us down that path, because I think it's important. It's very, I don't want to say it's lightly, but in verse 10, for if we were enemies, we were reconciled to God, and we were enemies like that. I think it's just a word that we use lightly, but for you to attach the stories to it, it really lands, because that's how he looked at us. So we should be able to look at others with that same grace and give that reconciliation. But I think it's really difficult for us. We are humans. That's just the way that we operate. But when you realize what he did when we were at that state, at our lowest, and when we were enemies, he came down to us. It was God's initiative. It wasn't anything that we did as humanity. It was God pursuing us. He was restoring the relationship and initiating healing. That's essentially what was going on, and what Paul's talking about here. Then it allows us to, once we wrap our hands around that and understand that God came down to us, it's like, okay, we're enemies. We're at our lowest. God's not asking us to climb higher, right? That's always, I think that's one of the things that we go back to religion always says, you gotta climb higher. No, the gospel, what he's saying right here is he came down to us when we were at our lowest, when we were enemies. And that, once you can wrap a hold of that, it allows you to really rejoice. Yeah. That's where it's rooted in that reconciliation. It's not rooted in anything that we've done, anything that we have or that we hold. I think Paul teaches us to rejoice because that there's a relationship that was restored, regardless of the external conditions.
That's so good. That's so good. And so I think as we go through this study, personally, like I said, I want to I wanted to say this without shame, but for me, it was like recognizing where I've been an enemy so I can receive his grace. And then secondly, like if I understand that, then like how do we get others to recognize the love, the grace, the goodness of God? He's so good. How do we get other people to do it? And one of the ways we do that is just be love. We have to, the Muslim family, I have to be love to them. Because it's real easy to just be a Pharisee if we're not careful.
Yes, it is.
But no, Christ died for them. Christ died for their, and this is hard, for us to grasp sometimes, but he died for the murderer. He died for the rapist. He died for the pedophile. He died for those people. He died for the one that, that is causing chaos now. He died for them, even if they're an enemy. And my prayer is, Lord, help me see with your eyes, because my eyes don't see that way naturally.
Yes.
The flesh is flesh. So
but when you wrap your hands around that, I think that's really when reconciliation holds. It gives you that point of where salvation then becomes the anchor, when you can start to see, and that's part of being a Christian, is to try to be Christ-like, right? And it's to try to see things like that, to try to have unending love regardless of circumstances. But when you kind of wrap your hands around that, I think it becomes the starting point of your faith. It allows it to be the anchor for endurance. It allows you to be the anchor for hope and for joy throughout your life, regardless of circumstances and regardless who comes into your world. You are able to approach things because you can have a better understanding of what he did for you. And it's the golden rule: do unto others as you would want done unto you, right? and what did he already do for you?
Yeah.
So, when you look at it this way, I think Romans 5, it really reminds us of something that we can't afford to forget. God did not save us because we were strong. He saved us because he is good. He met us at our lowest point. He reconciled while we were still far off, and he proved his love through action, not just words. That means our confidence isn't rooted in how well we're doing today. It's rooted in what Jesus has already done for us. So some encouragement for the week. Stop measuring God's love by your circumstances. Start anchoring your faith in the cross. If everything else was stripped away, reconciliation with God would still be enough.
Yes.
So if this episode encouraged you, share it with someone who might need hope in their own storm. And just keep living in the overflow of God's presence and power in your everyday life. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your week. And come out tomorrow, again, Bible study Wednesday night, community dinner Wednesday night. I don't have the menus right in front of me, so I'm not even going to say what it is because I will absolutely get it wrong. But I know it'll be something.
I don't remember it. I just saw it. But either way, it'll be good. It'll be good.
It'll be good. But appreciate y'all tuning in. Catch us on the next one. Have a good one, y'all. Take care.